California Dreaming is brought to you by BLUBRRY. You know, there is a little bit more to making a podcast than just talking into a mic and hitting publish. You need more than that. And I'm talking about a reliable hosting service so your time can be spent working on your show. You also want accurate download numbers, you want to see the audience that you're reaching, and you're going to want a webpage that is simple and easy to work with. That's why I choose BLUBRRY. With its simple media hosting and fully integrated WordPress website, it can't get any easier. So if you host a show or if you're thinking about starting one, visit www.orbitaljigsaw.com/dream to give BLUBRRY a try for a month for free. BLUBRRY's support team will be right there every step of the way to help you migrate over so you won't lose any of your subscribers in the process. And if you're brand new to this, they can get your new show up and running. And with a month for free to try it out using promo code DREAM, what have you got to lose? There are a number of ways that you can support California Dreaming. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can spread the word about the show. You can recommend us in podcast and true crime fan groups. You can leave the show a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to the show on. And if you would like to go a little above and beyond, you can support the show on Patreon. You will be able to gain access to at least one exclusive episode per month, and there are currently more than 45 episodes to binge, so it's a pretty good deal starting at just $1. In addition, there are about 8 or 9 premium episodes for supporters at the $5 and above tiers. This week, I'd like to thank these new patrons who joined back in May and early June: Stephanie M., Sandra, Heather K., Lucy R., Carrie S., Gabby, Maddie, Barbara G., Jess G., Ashley, Deborah, Lauren C., Linda B., and Krista M. I'd also like to thank Nancy, Marion R. for joining and going up a tier, Sarah S., Cynthia D., Carrie W., Sarah G., and Katie B. for raising your pledges to the next tier, and I would like to thank Justine F. for coming back to Patreon. If you're unable to sign up for a monthly subscription, then you can help the show with a one-time donation through our PayPal using our email, which is californiapod, and that's all lowercase letters, @gmail.com. I'd like to thank Dana and Marjorie for your recent contributions to the show through PayPal. Every little bit helps keeping California Dreaming and me going, so thank you. I also want to mention really quickly that for the last 3 days I've been babysitting. I'm going again today. Today's Friday, June 17th, 2020. It's about 7:30 in the morning. I have to be at the babysitting at 9:30, so I'm trying to squeeze this in. If I don't finish now, I'm going to finish tonight. And tomorrow I'm going to California to visit with my daughter, to visit with a couple friends, and to pick up my cat. I posted about it in the Facebook group. I'm really grateful for all of your positive comments and all of the love and support that you've been giving me through all of the crap that I've been complaining about in the group. So thank you. I love you all so much. So what I'm doing with this episode is I think I'm going to go ahead and split it into 2 parts because I wanted to make sure I got you some content before I left for California. So I'm going to do this as part 1, and then when I get back on Monday, I should be finished writing part 2, and I will have that out for you as well. So thank you for your patience, and let's get started. I'm going to start off by reading you a quote. You do such a disservice when you lie about things like this. That comes directly from an interview with former Empire star Jussie Smollett that he gave on February 14th, 2009, with Emmy-winning Good Morning America anchor Robin Roberts. You do such a disservice when you lie about things like that. How utterly prophetic those 12 words would turn out to be. If you happen to listen to the Patreon bonus I posted a couple of weeks ago entitled The Tale of the Billionaire Boys Club, somewhere in that 2-hour plus long story, I said something along the lines of, People don't like being lied to. There are a variety of emotions a person may experience if they found out that they've been deceived, especially by somebody close to you. If it's someone that you care about, somebody you never thought would tell a lie, much less a lie of epic proportions. A lie that could topple the teller of the lie, or could topple an empire. People lie for various reasons. One of the main reasons is perhaps when a spouse lies to another spouse about infidelity. The lie can sometimes be justified, at least in the mind of the person who is telling the lie, that the truth is more painful and destructive than the lie itself. Then that way the lie really won't hurt anyone. The lie won't cost anyone anything. A lie meant to evoke a visceral reaction to something or some event for one reason or another. Lies people tell sometimes because they want to get a certain response from people or attention. Some people tell what are called white lies. Lies that are really thought to be very trivial and harmless. At times, stories go viral online that involve celebrities telling lies and getting caught. More often than not, these tend to be white lies. It makes you wonder why the lie was even told in the first place. Some are big, though. Not too long ago in a recent episode, I brought up the college admissions scandal ordeal that Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman got caught up in. That goes a little bit beyond the average celebrity lie because it crossed the line into being a criminal act. But I found a number of articles about celebrities who got caught lying. Most of them weren't a big deal, and in the end, it really didn't cause harm to their careers. If their careers went sideways, it was likely due to other reasons. So, let me share some of these celebrity lies with you. Mila Kunis, she auditioned for That 70s Show. She told them that she was 18. It was later revealed that she was actually only 14, but she had been given the role, so she was kept on. You know, they must have had to have made sure that they abided by labor laws and restrict how much time minors can spend working and to ensure that they're being tutored as well, stuff like that. So it's important for people to be honest about their age, especially when they're still a minor. Jamaican rapper and singer Sean Kingston, it's been a minute since we've heard about him, right? Well, he posted about or said something about having to have purchased a really expensive sports car from Justin Bieber. But the truth was that Justin had only loaned him the car. Another rapper, Tyga, real name Michael Stevenson, he has publicly said, and he's listed online as being born and raised in Compton, California. However, there was a video that surfaced when he was a guest on a game show, and he talked about being raised in a quote-unquote wealthy home in the San Fernando Valley. He later claimed that that video footage and the game show was all scripted, and he has stuck to his story that he is indeed from Compton. A lie told by White Stripes members Jack and Megan White said that they were brother and sister. However, later on it was revealed that they weren't siblings at all. They'd actually been married and divorced and were able to remain good friends to work together as the rock duo. And the motivation for the lie was simply to protect their privacy, which is understandable. No harm, no foul when it comes to a lie like that, I suppose. It's really nobody's business. The next lie was a bit more complicated, and to me, it kind of made the lie teller look kind of silly. And honestly, I don't know if the guy actually knowingly lied, but his story went viral when it hit the media. New Orleans Saints linebacker Monte Teo had garnered a great deal of attention and sympathy when he shared that his girlfriend and his grandmother both passed away on the same day, which was September 11th, 2012. At the time, he was still in college playing football, and he would be taken in the upcoming 2013 draft to the San Diego Chargers. But his story distracted from anything that had to do with his skill as a football player. Manti had said that his girlfriend, who was a student at Stanford, Lene Kekua, had suffered a pretty bad car accident, like where she was really injured, and when she was hospitalized for those injuries, it was discovered that she had leukemia. That year, Manti had been nominated for the Heisman Trophy, but he came in second to Johnny Manziel. Menzel, I don't know how to say it, Manziel, who turned out to be a pretty big bust, I believe. I think he only played in the NFL for one season, and then he went to go play in the CFL, which is the Canadian Football League. He also had to come up with a bunch of stupid nicknames for himself, like Johnny Cleveland, Johnny Football, Johnny Jam Boogie, and after a barrage of off-the-field issues and pretty much just being a douchebag, we can call him Johnny Just Go Away. But anyway, back to Manti Te'o. As it turned out, the dead girlfriend actually never existed. Now, whether or not Manti lied about the death to get attention and sympathy remains a matter of opinion. However, his official story was that he was catfished. And later on, someone did come forward and admitted to catfishing Manti because he said he was in love with him. So there's that. You can believe what you want. Our next lie comes from Beyonce. Yes, the Queen Bee herself has apparently been caught up in at least one lie. She credited herself for writing her hit song, Irreplaceable. You remember that song, To the Left, to the Left. But singer Ennio said, is that how you say his name? N-E-Y-O? Neo? He said that he was the one who wrote the song, but he alley-ooped it to Beyonce because it seemed like the song better suited to be sung by a woman. Which I tend to agree, and I did like that song. I also heard over the years that Beyonce has fibbed about her age. I even heard that the internet doesn't even really know how old she actually is. In a seemingly pointless lie, apparently Britney Spears had posted a picture of some corn. It was like Mexican-style corn. And if you aren't familiar, it's grilled corn that is lathered in a blend of mayonnaise, sour cream, cilantro, Parmesan cheese, lime, and sprinkled with chili powder. If you haven't had it, it might sound a little bit weird. But if you're from Southern California, you've probably had this corn. You've probably been able to buy some at the park, at the county fair. It's pretty much everywhere. Usually at big gatherings or events, so maybe not lately with the pandemic stuff going on, but anyway. She posted a picture of this Mexican grilled corn, and it was really nice. It was a very Instagram-worthy picture. And she wrote or captioned it, "Too good to be true." Well, it turns out it was too good to be true because the picture is the top result when you Google Mexican grilled corn, which I did, and it is still the top result to this day, and it's attached to a recipe, not to Britney's Instagram. Why the lie about the corn? Who knows? But moving on. The next celebrity lie involved Kylie Jenner and her pouty lips. She denied having done anything to enhance the size of her lips, when clearly, if you compare pics of her when she was younger to how she looks now, she has had something done to enhance the size of her lips, and it's pretty obvious. She said it was makeup trickery, and everyone was like, girl, there is no makeup in the world that good. She eventually admitted to getting lip fillers, and nobody cares. So more about lying about ages. Actress Rebel Wilson said in 2015 that she was 29, but she was actually 35. So I guess today that would make her 40. And I think she looks great. I love her style. I love her hair. I love her makeup. I think she's really funny. So I personally think it would have suited her better to have stuck to her real age because I think she looks younger than she really is. So one of the more disturbing lies that was on this list involved Lindsay Lohan. Considering everything that this girl has been through, I tended to have a measure of respect for her being able to be candid and open and honest in interviews about her struggles with addiction. But at some point, in conjunction with her various legal troubles, Lindsay had apparently been ordered to complete some community service, which I guess she signed up to do at a Los Angeles County coroner's office. And it was there where she claimed that she was ordered to help deal with the body bag that contained the remains or the body of Whitney Houston. If you recall, Whitney died in what had ruled to have been an accidental drowning on February 9th, 2012. in a bathtub in her suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Toxicology reports later indicated that she had cocaine and Xanax and Benadryl among some other substances in her system that attributed to her drowning death. The coroner's office set the record straight about Lindsay handling Whitney's body bag and said that Whitney was actually never in a body bag. Pics of her online being taken out of the hotel on a gurney show her covered with a white sheet. So, yeah, I would assume that there would be no time that she was ever placed in a body bag from there. If she was going to be put in a body bag, it would have happened inside the hotel. Why Lindsay Lohan would say such a thing, I don't know. But to me, it was such a really bizarre thing to want to lie about, but maybe it was just for attention. Another age fibber, Nicki Minaj, she has said that she was born in 1984, but a police report surfaced related to a fight that she had been involved in 2011 listed the year she was born as being 1982. Singer Jennifer Lopez also fibbed about her age. I believe during the time that she was dating P. Diddy, the truth had come out. She had been saying she was born in 1970, but she was actually born in 1969. Rapper Nelly also at one point shaved about 3 years off his age as well. Another rapper, Rick Ross, I guess he took some heat because it was revealed that he used to work as a corrections officer. And I suppose if you're a rapper working in any law enforcement capacity is sort of a contradiction. Anyway, the lie was when photos of him working as a corrections officer surfaced, he said that these things were photoshopped, that he never worked there. But later he admitted, yeah, those pics were real and he did work as a prison guard. One of the biggest liars on our list is disgraced former Tour de France champion, like 7 times maybe. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head. He lied and lied and lied and lied about taking banned performance-enhancing substances, Lance Armstrong. He eventually got caught in his lie and was banned from competing in cycling competitions forever. I mean, we can go on and on and on about athletes who've lied about doping. So I guess Lance was probably one of the more notable ones that had also been a big, huge disappointment because he had been a cancer survivor only to come back and win all of these Tour de France championships. And he was so admired and revered for the accomplishment that it was just like one big, huge letdown for so many of his fans that had looked up to him. So anyway, dreamers, by and large, these lies that I've listed from these celebrities mostly only harmed themselves. I mean, the Lance Armstrong one was pretty messed up because he took championships away from others who could have won those races, and those championships were never going to be reissued to the second place or the runner-up. I mean, those are completely vacated. But the lying about your age or your possessions, your material possessions, or an experience that you had in the past, or even plastic surgery, it's like not really a big deal, but social media and the internet like to have a field day with it all. The celebrity lie that we're going to talk about today is some next level duplicity, however, because this man lied about being the victim of a hate crime by making the claim that the perpetrators of this hate crime were racist, homophobic, Donald Trump supporters. And racial tensions in the United States is always a hot button issue. And this, it seemed, was meant to incite people. While I didn't closely follow this case when it first broke last year, it has taken some twists and turns since then. The story just kind of popped in my head over the last couple of weeks as we'd been talking about some hate crimes. And this one is a little bit different, and there's nothing really violent or tragic that actually happened. It's more just ridiculous and stupid. I wanted to know more about the story, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So why don't we go ahead and get started in this 151st episode of California Dreaming. And this is probably going to be a 2-parter, and the second part will come out early next week. The tale of Jussie Smollett's hate crime hoax. Over the course of the last month and a half or so, we have discussed cases on our show that involved some important subject matters, problematic subject matters that persist in the United States. And in a way, when something controversial happens, it begins to make national and sometimes international news. And right now, we have to take into consideration the fact that we've spent the last 4 or 5 months dealing with a very deadly COVID-19 pandemic. I've brought up the pandemic in several of our recent episodes because it continues to affect all of us. It has impacted our lives massively, and it's been one of the most difficult things that we've ever had to face together, ever. We've had time on our hands, we've been quarantined, we've been isolated, we've been locked down, we've been forced to stay away not only from our friends, but from our families and basically everyone that we love and care about. We're seeing people seemingly lose their cool over some relatively trivial stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you, dreamers, it happened to me a couple of days ago. Dare I say that I came close, I probably did, join the ranks of the quote-unquote, I want to speak to your manager sorority. And it was so stupid. And I caught myself and I was like, you know what? I'm not necessarily the one here who has an overblown sense of entitlement, but I just want to move on with my damn day. It was a blistering hot 114 degrees outside. That would be 45.6 degrees Celsius. And David, you know David, my estranged husband, I think that's the first time I've ever said that. He asked if I wanted to go to the mall. He needed to get a couple things from the department store. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to hang out. You know, he's the only human being that I know in the state of Nevada. But it was so flippin' hot outside, I wasn't sure I would survive a trip to the mall. I agreed to go with the proviso that I get dropped off at the entrance of the mall while he goes and parks the car. So we're walking through the mall, and this is really the first time I had gone to a place where I'd been walking around for an extended period of time with a mask on. And I started to not really feel that great. I was trying to pace myself with breathing and walking, and I was just so hot. And I just don't think my brain was getting enough oxygen. So we headed over to the food court, and I wanted to get something really, really cold to drink, preferably something frozen to drink. So I go to the Dairy Queen, right? And I never go to the Dairy Queen. I've had bouts with lactose intolerance, so the name of the place just sort of is a turnoff. But they have smoothies or whatever, so I got in line. And we're behind this lady. And I really only saw this lady and the guy that she was with from behind, so I don't know if it was her son or her partner or husband or boyfriend or whatever. They literally were standing there for anywhere from about 5 to 7 minutes discussing working with masks on with the cashier at the Dairy Queen. They're talking about the masks that they're wearing on their faces. The cashier is going on and on about his mask and where he got it. And these people are not ordering any food. They're not ordering any drinks. They're not ordering any blizzards. And I'm normally a pretty patient person about this crap, but I wasn't feeling well and I just wanted a drink and I just wanted to sit down. And this is really no exaggeration, dreamers. I was behind these two people who were having a conversation with the Dairy Queen cashier for more than 5 minutes, and I was getting so upset because I felt so crappy. And I could see the cashier kind of glancing at me, you know, past the couple that weren't even paying attention. They never turned around. They never acknowledged that I was behind them. And then there was a couple more people that lined up behind me. But the couple who was manipulating the cashier's time just never even took a moment to glance over their shoulders to see that they're causing the line to build up here. And the cashier, he was glancing at us, but he wasn't doing the courteous thing by asking the couple to step aside and let him take everyone else's orders. He just kept going on and on and on. And finally, he runs their debit card. And mind you, this is moving in slow motion because nobody is focused on what they're doing. All three of these people are talking and trying to finish up the transaction, but they're not paying attention to what they're doing. So it's going even more slow than it should have. The woman finally takes her card and her receipt, and then she continues talking to the cashier. And she's not moving aside. She's not putting her card back in her wallet. She's just freaking standing there talking. And mind you, there are now people in line behind me. I was social distancing, standing on the marker where you're supposed to wait for your turn. And I had been standing there for freaking ever. So finally, I just marched up to the counter and said my order out loud. And the cashier, no lie, he was like, whoa, lady, hold on. You have to wait 6 feet back. And oh, dreamers, I just lost it, you guys. I was like, in case you haven't noticed, I've been waiting 6 feet back for the entirety of the conversation that you all are having that has nothing to do with the menu items or placing an order. They paid for their stuff. I'm finished waiting. I know, dreamers. It was a moment. I was being that woman. I won't even say it because I don't want to offend anybody. But damn, I was so over this entire thing. And that's what I mean when I'm saying this pandemic is making us all a little on edge. And things seem to be getting under our skin quicker and faster lately, at least for some. And we see it on social media. Thank God nobody was videotaping me with their phone, right? I lost my cool, but I couldn't breathe with my mask on. And I'm walking around a crowded mall. It's hot. It's so hot outside. And I'm built for beach weather, not hell weather. And how I was feeling in that moment and how I've been feeling about situations like that can be attributed to COVID-19. Okay. I feel better now that I've been able to vent about that. Anyway, back on topic. I want to take us back just about a year before the coronavirus began creeping its way into not just the United States, but countries all over the world. At the time, there was a popular show on Fox called Empire. It's a fictional show about a hip-hop company called Empire Entertainment. The show was set in New York, though it was filmed in Chicago. I did not watch the show, however, my daughter did. I wasn't exactly a huge fan of her watching it because one of the stars of the show, Terrence Howard, he himself has a long and disturbing history of violence towards women, which is another aspect of this story that maybe I'll touch on towards the end if I have time, I'm not sure. I tried to explain it to my daughter. Teenagers are just going to watch what they watch, so I try not to step on her toes too much or control what she does. But honestly, I'm not sure why Terrence Howard's career has managed to sidestep the hashtag No More campaign against domestic violence and abuse. And that was all followed up with the Time's Up movement, the Me Too movement. For whatever reason, Terrence Howard has been pretty much able to skate, despite a long and documented history of violence towards his intimate partners. But anyway, that's another story for another day. So Empire premiered in January of 2015. It garnered a large audience and was well received. The show ran for 6 seasons, the series finale having aired this year on April 21st, 2020. Terrence Howard portrayed Lucius Lyon, a former drug dealer turned hip-hop mogul, and was the chief executive officer of Empire Entertainment. He had been given only a certain amount of time to live because of some health issues. So the premise of the show was he was in a place where he needed to select someone to replace him upon the event of his death. So he has 3 sons, and he is needing to choose one of them to prepare them for taking over as CEO when he passes away. One son is named Andre Lyon, portrayed by Trey Byers, who is the chief financial officer of Empire Entertainment. He's the eldest son. Another son is a rapper named Hakeem Lyon, portrayed by Brashear Gray. And the third son is a songwriter with a focus on R&B music named Jamal Lyon, who is portrayed by Jussie Smollett. In the meantime, Lucius's ex-wife, Cookie, is portrayed by Taraji P. Henson. She is serving 17 years in prison on a drug dealing conviction. She feels as though her time served was a sacrifice that she made for Lucius and Empire Entertainment. So when she gets out, she not only wants control of the company, she wants control over her 3 sons as well. The youngest son, Hakeem, he's hungry to be famous and is an up-and-coming standout in the world of hip-hop. But he has somewhat of a strained relationship with his mother, but he is very close to his middle brother, Jamal. The oldest son, Andre, the CFO of Empire Entertainment, he is educated, he has a lust for power, but he's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He wants to take charge of the company, but he has to fight for it against his 2 younger brothers. And the middle brother, Jamal, he is considered to be the most talented of the 3. He is a singer and a songwriter, and he strongly rallies against music being controlled by corporate entities. His character is extremely talented, and his character is also gay. The actor who plays Jamal, Jussie Smollett, is also gay in real life. In the show's 2nd season, Jamal was accidentally shot, and he began to struggle with PTSD as well as an addiction to pain medications, and he eventually ends up in rehab. However, by the end of season 5, Jamal is conspicuously absent from the show for the last 2 episodes. However, he is talked about by the other characters. Jamal is neither seen nor is he credited for his role at any point in the show's 6th and final season. Many of you listening may know why Jamal vanished from Empire, and we will get to that. Let's first talk a little bit about Jussie Smollett's background and career. He was born in Santa Rosa, California on June 21st, 1982. Santa Rosa is a beautiful city located in Sonoma County. It's near the San Francisco Bay Area and is part of California's wine country. Smolett was the 3rd of 6 children to parents Janet and Joel Smolett. He is biracial. His mother is African American. His father, who passed away in 2014, was Jewish. As I mentioned, Smolett is gay, and when he was 19 years old, that's when he came out to his mom and dad. Smolett made his feature film debut in 1992's The Mighty Ducks and followed that up with a role in 1994's North. He had a handful of movie and television roles through the 90s, 2000s, and into the 2010s, though he wasn't that prolific of an actor. He was finally cast into his most groundbreaking role on Empire as Jamal Lyon in 2014. Groundbreaking in that it was one of the first, if not the first, depiction of a successful African-American gay man on television. Shortly after being cast in that role, he also signed a record deal with Columbia Records, and he was featured on several songs on Empire's soundtrack. Smolett publicly came out as gay on Ellen in early 2015, just a couple of months after Empire premiered on Fox. Now, backing up a few years, Smolett did have one scrape with the law in Los Angeles when he was arrested and charged with giving false information to an officer of the law. This happened in 2007, so he was about 25 years old at the time. So he wasn't that young to know what he should and should not be doing, right? He had been in about a half dozen movies and TV shows, so he hadn't been acting very much. And as a matter of fact, between 1995 and 2012, Smolett is credited for having played one role in a short film called Pitch This, and when you Google it, you can't even find it. Even on Wikipedia, there's no link to it. So from the age of 12 to 24, Smolett really wasn't doing any acting at all. And I don't know if he was having trouble finding work or if he wasn't interested, whatever the case was. At the time of his arrest in 2007, he was not actively working on any TV shows or movies. Now, what he did was he was pulled over for a DUI and driving without a license. But he compounded his problems by giving the police officer who pulled him over a fake name. Well, it wasn't exactly a fake name. he gave his brother's name, which seems kind of messed up to me because you are potentially getting your own brother in trouble here. Smolett also signed his paperwork and his notice to appear back in court with his brother's name as well. I mean, I don't have brothers and sisters, but it's like, that seems kind of like a dick move, trying to save yourself by throwing your brother's name under the bus. I don't know. Maybe you think I might be a little too judgy on this, but I just didn't like it. I think it was a bit telling of the kind of person Smolett was, an indicator of his character. If you disagree with me, come on the discussion page and tell me. But anyway, Smolett ended up pleading no contest to everything and was given a fine and some probation. That was his only run-in with the law. That is, until 2019. So, let's get into that fiasco. You listening may be familiar with the story, but I am also going to talk about other aspects of what happened here. And I am particularly interested in how and when people started noticing something kind of stunk about this whole entire thing. Like, how did we come to know this? How did we start figuring it out? Last year, we talked about Chris Watts in 2018 when his wife and kids went missing. That guy had the nerve to get on TV, and it was so abundantly clear that he was lying. It was written all over his face, all of his body language. It was obvious to us immediately that he was being deceitful. When we talked about the Watts family tragedy in one of our bonus episodes, I went into how we could tell he was lying. We analyzed his mannerisms, we analyzed the way that he said things, and how his body language was giving him away. And it was fascinating to me, the little tells and the nuances. I liked looking into that. So when the Jussie Smollett story happened in late January 2019, the news broke that the Empire star had been the target of a hate crime and an attack in Chicago. And I was like everyone else, like, oh my goodness, that's so messed up. How are people behaving this way? Like, I really felt bad for the guy, and I didn't even know who he was. As the victim of a crime that had so many aspects to it that were meant to evoke a sense of anger and real hatred. Like, who did these white guys think they were, running around, attacking a man because of the color of his skin, and doing so in the name of Donald Trump? It was a gross story, and I sympathized with Smolett as the victim of such a vicious crime, as did many people, many celebrities, and many of us. Even Trump himself denounced the attackers. So this is what was said to have happened at approximately 2 a.m. in Chicago on Tuesday, January 29th, 2019. And I'm going to come back through some of these events more specifically once I get through the details of what was said to have gone down. Smolett said that he had flown into Chicago that night, and his creative director, a man named Frank Gadsden, met him there at the airport and gave him a ride home. They arrived back at Smollett's apartment, and he lives in a really nice apartment complex. If you've seen some of the police body cam video, you can see them going into the entrance. I mean, it's a beautiful building. So when Smolett got there, he was apparently pretty hungry, but when he looked into the kitchen and into the fridge, he saw that there was nothing to eat. So he decided to leave his apartment on foot to walk over to Walgreens and to smoke. Walgreens was not open at that hour, so Smolett said that he next decided to go to Subway. And it seems as though Subways are located pretty much all over the world, so most, if not all of you listening, should be familiar with the place. This particular Subway location, according to Smolett, was open 24 hours and was located across the street from his apartment building. Smolett said he called Frank to let him know that he was going to Subway to get a salad. Did he want anything? So Smolett went to Subway, ordered his food, and while he was in the restaurant, he said that he sent a text message to his manager asking him to give him a call when he had a chance. Smolett said that his manager called him right away. And as he was speaking to him on the phone and crossing the street, he heard somebody say the word empire out loud from behind him. He ignored whomever it was that said that and kept walking. And apparently this person who said that did not take well to being ignored, so they said it again, but they added the F word and the N word the second time, and we can assume that they escalated their language to these profanities to get Smolett to pay attention to them. So when he heard this, and he heard the racial slur being shouted at him, Smolett said he turned around and said, "What the F did you just say to me?" And that's when his attacker, which at the time Smolett seemed to only notice that there was one person who had a ski mask on, the attacker said, "This is MAGA country." And then he called Smolett the N-word again, and then the attacker hauled off and punched him in the face. Smolett said he immediately fought back, punching the guy in the face as well. He said in the next moment they were in a fight. He described it as a tussle. Smolett said the ground was very icy and the tussle went on for what seemed like a minute maybe. Seemed like longer, but it wasn't that long. And they ended up near the stairs, near his apartment. He said the fight continued for a few more seconds before he realized that there were two attackers, not just one. And as Smolett was tangled up in this tussle with the first attacker, the second one apparently began delivering several kicks to his back. At that point, Smolett said the attack just suddenly stopped. Inexplicably, the two attackers halted their assault on him and proceeded to run away from the scene on foot. And he said he watched them as they ran. Smolett next became aware that his phone had fallen out of his pocket and onto the ground. All the while, his manager was still on the other end of the line. He had never hung up as Smolett found himself under attack by these two masked men, who he described as being white. So Smolett got back on the phone to see if his manager was still there, which he was. And according to Smolett, his manager said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he told him that he was just attacked. And in that moment, he was telling his manager that he looked down at himself and at the front of his body, and he noticed that there was a rope looped around his neck, fashioned to be like a noose. Smolett said that he had no idea that his attackers had slipped this rope around his neck, which was obviously meant to be a symbol of the history of the lynching of Black people in America. Smolett said that the attack, while it felt like it carried on for several minutes, it was his estimation that it lasted less than 60 seconds, possibly even 45 or 30 seconds. But he said he honestly couldn't say for sure. But these attackers were so quick with what they had done to him, and he had no idea that they put this rope around him. And distressed over what he was seeing, he started yelling into the phone at his manager, "There's an effing rope around my neck." So the police were called. Jussie Smollett wasn't actually the one who called police. It was his creative director, Frank, who I'd mentioned earlier. He was the one who called. The 911 audio has been released. I think he called twice. I think the first time they may have been disconnected. But it had some parts redacted. It's really annoying to listen to on YouTube because of the long beeps in the audio. But he told the operator that he works with an artist. He didn't want to say who the guy's name was. And he described how he had walked a subway and some guys had jumped him. He also told the 911 operator that he came downstairs and outside the apartment to look at the address because the victim did not want him to call and make the police report. When the operator heard this, the operator told Frank that only the victim can make the report of the attack, that he can't make it for him. So if he doesn't want to report it, they're not going to take it. So as Frank is making this report, there isn't really a sense of urgency. This isn't really an emergency because the whole attack is over. So police aren't actually going to be rushing over there with sirens blasting. The Chicago police arrived about 30 minutes after Frank's call had come in. At some point, while waiting for the police, Smolett noticed that he was smelling the strong odor of bleach. He also saw that the clothing that he was wearing had some bleached out spots. And it was in that moment he realized his attacker had not only put this noose around his neck, they had doused him with bleach. When police arrived, Smolett described what had happened, that he was attacked by two white men wearing ski masks in front of his apartment. They shouted homophobic and racial slurs at him, and he also reported that the two men told him that this was MAGA country. And if you don't know, MAGA is Make America Great Again. That's Donald Trump's campaign slogan, whatever. So from here on out, when we say MAGA, that has to do with Trump, okay? Smolett said that these guys didn't have any weapons with them, that they fought punching and kicking, and Smolett said that they may have even attempted to bite him. Then he said the men who fought with him poured some sort of liquid on him, and they placed a noose around his neck. He said that he fought back against his attackers, punching at least one of them once, and having been in a tussle with them. And then from there, the fight abruptly ended when the men suddenly ran off. When police arrived at the scene, Smolett still had the rope looped around his neck. He did not remove it because he explained he wanted the police to see for themselves what had been done to him. He also did not change out of his bleached-soaked clothes. At the time, Smolett opined that the attack could have been prompted by him aggressively and openly speaking out against President Trump on social media. He said that he believed the attack was also connected to a threatening letter that he had received at the Empire Studios 1 week prior to the attack. So let's stop here and talk about this letter. Now, I didn't know about this aspect of the story when I first started researching this. Like I said, I only paid a minimal amount of attention to this when it was happening. Maybe some of you have seen the letter, maybe some of you haven't. I will post a picture of it when this episode goes live. At first glance, the letter looks very bizarre in so many ways. But when you think about it, it appears to be an attempt to make sure whomever is writing this letter and addressing this envelope will not be able to ever be identified by matching up handwriting. To me, it looks like someone used either an orange or a red pen or marker or highlighter to write the letters and address the envelope. And it also looks like the author attempted to use his or her non-dominant hand to do the writing in order for it to be extra sloppy, because it is exactly that. It's so sloppy. I personally can't even believe that this thing made it through the postal service, but it did, because in the images, the postage stamps are postmarked, so they did go through the United States Post Office. I thought about it and I thought, well, maybe the post office or the studio thought perhaps the letter came from a kid, something like that. It was addressed to Empire and it was being sent to the studio where the show was filmed. Maybe it was from a young fan who doesn't really have great penmanship. However, in the upper left-hand corner where the return address usually goes, it says MAGA in big, blocky, sloppy orange letters. The letter inside had letters cut out from a magazine that was a death threat and used a homophobic slur in referring to Smolett. Next to that, again with the orange marker or highlighter, the author of the letter made a very sloppy drawing of a tree with a stick figure depiction of Smolett hanging from the tree by a noose and what appears to be a gun pointing at him with a bullet coming out of the gun. Now, mind you, dreamers, this whole drawing is totally messy, but also included in the letter was a powdery white substance, which was later tested and turned out to be crushed up aspirin or Tylenol or something like that. It was harmless. A report about the letter to the Chicago police was made. However, they ended up handing that investigation off to the FBI since the incident involved the Postal Service and it was a federal thing. Certain types of crimes fall under the jurisdiction of the FBI, no matter what state the crime occurred in, or if the crime didn't exactly even occur in a state specifically. And the crimes that are automatically handled by the FBI include bank robberies, terrorism, cyber crimes, political or public office corruption, civil rights violations, organized crime, white-collar crimes, kidnappings, usually if the victim is transported across state lines, and major crimes. For example, if a small or inexperienced law enforcement agency is investigating a major crime in their jurisdiction, they have the option to solicit the help of the FBI, who may be better equipped and better trained and highly experienced to investigate and have the investigative tools to do a more effective job. The FBI's investigation into the letter was ongoing at the time the attack on Smolett took place a week later. Smolett told the police that he believed the incidents were related. Whatever the FBI and law enforcement thought at the time about the letter and the attack, they were keeping things close to the vest early on, especially when they're trying to sort out what the heck is going on with this guy. I mentioned in the beginning when I heard about what happened to Jussie Smollett that my reaction was lukewarm. I just really wasn't paying that close attention to the finer details of the attack itself. I had never heard of Jussie Smollett. I was not a fan, nor had I ever watched Empire. And for the most part, my reaction was more or less, wow, that's a terrible thing to happen to the guy. I talked about it casually with my daughter. She really enjoyed watching Empire, and we discussed it briefly in conversation. And that was barely more than just like, oh, hey, did you hear about what happened to that guy from Empire? The attack had all the elements of a hate crime designed to incite a specific demographic. It had elements that were racist, homophobic, and whatever it is you call it when you don't like the President of the United States, Trumpophobic feelings. The report of the attack provided by Smolett to police and eventually to the public was meant to anger those groups. People who belong to or are allies of the LGBTQ community, the Black community, and the community who have a strong dislike and contempt for Trump and his administration. And everybody was talking about this story, you guys. Everybody was weighing in. Everybody had an opinion. By everybody, I mean people who have a platform, celebrities, public figures, people like that. People were scheduled on various talk shows. They might not have even known Jussie Smollett, whether they were morning, midday, or nighttime shows. Guests on these talk shows were questioned about how they felt about what happened to Jussie Smollett. There was a tremendous amount of support for the guy. There was an outpouring of love and sympathy and strength being sent his direction. There was a sadness about the attack. There was shock. There was anger. People were quick to make sure that kindness and love would conquer the cruelty and hate. And it continued to inspire conversations across the country for a short time about racism, bigotry, and violence. In the end, love was going to win. Social media was going to make sure of that. What might not have been immediately apparent in the wake of the attack on Smolett was that there was a segment of the community who were skeptical of him and his account of what happened. But slowly, that was kind of what the story was morphing into. Did this really happen or not? There were some who had heard Smollett's story making the rounds in the news and on social media who genuinely supported him, and they sympathized and they were angry and hurt. People openly denounced what happened to him. And like when James Byrd Jr. was murdered by 3 white men in Texas in 1998 by chaining him to the back of their truck and dragging him to his death in an act that was labeled as a modern-day lynching, this thing that happened to Jussie Smollett was equated as being the same thing, a modern-day lynching. Keep that in mind as we go along with our story here. But there were a growing number of people who began picking apart Smollett's account of what happened to him that night. The details of his story were being scrutinized, and the timeline was being analyzed moment to moment. The skepticism slowly grew when it came to the specifics of the hate crime that Smolett had described. And it wasn't just one or two minor little hiccups. It was a lot that people were finding to be incredulous. So that being said, dreamers, I want to approach this portion of this case from two different angles. I want to look at what Smolett said, and I want to look at the way that he said it. Because I'll be completely honest with you, never did it occur to me when this story first broke that it had all been fabricated. The thought didn't even cross my mind. It's not that I believe everything I read on the internet. I just see these kind of stories come through my feed, and if the story is what it is from day one, I don't question it. But if some things change about the story, if details are added, if misleading information is corrected, I'll pick up on that stuff and those details. But beyond that, I usually don't nitpick through a case that hit the media so hard, like this story did. But if a story seems to just keep coming back and the thing just won't die, kind of like the whole Lori Vallow saga, and there were more details and shadiness and everything just kept escalating, yeah, I'll be paying attention. But with Jussie Smollett, he was attacked. The news hit pretty big. There was a lot of emotion and outrage, and then we heard it's fake. Okay, moving on then. But then, instead of quietly laying low for a while as things died down, Smolett kept coming forward trying to convince us of his truth. And this mainly had to do with the fact that the charges against him eventually were dropped. Temporarily, by the way. By then, I was just getting kind of fatigued by the whole story. Nobody got hurt, nothing to see here, carry on. Then, Jussie Smollett gets charged again, and this story just won't go away. So now you can't help but pay attention. It's like you're too invested now. You've been sucked into the Jussie Smollett Twilight Zone, and here I am making a whole episode about this debacle. This is certainly not the first time a celebrity lied. I talked about it in the beginning. But when you stack Smollett's story up against some of the lies that I talked about, this one stands apart. Most of those other celebrity lies, not all of them, but most of them really didn't harm anyone. They were all pretty innocuous and only caused perhaps a measure of embarrassment. Smollett's story, if it was going to be found to be untrue, had a great deal of potential to hurt and harm others in a sort of ripple kind of effect. And you will see that as we go through and analyze his recounting of this attack and the people that he could have potentially harmed. Skepticism about Smollett's story began mounting within a week of the attack, perhaps even less time than that. When Smolett sat down with Good Morning America anchor Robin Roberts on February 14, 2019, about 2 weeks after the attack, Robin started off by asking him about the doubters. He told her it was pissing him off, and it wasn't just the attack that he encountered on the street that night, but also the attacks that he's had to endure after the fact. The people were really doubting his story, accusing him of making it up or faking it. He told Robin, quote, "Listen, if I tell the truth, then that's it, because it's the truth. How do you doubt that?" And then it became, ooh, it's not necessarily that you don't believe the truth. You don't even want to see the truth. Next, Smolett told Robin about arriving at his apartment from the airport and there not being any food there. Not very many people believe that Jussie Smollett's apartment had nothing to eat in it. And that was all part of the need for a legitimate reason to leave his home and place himself outside at this very late hour of the night, like 2 a.m-ish. Not only that, we're talking about the end of January, which is pretty much in the depths of winter. The temperature at the time of the attack, according to timeanddate.com, was negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 28 degrees Celsius. In fact, This was just about when the Midwest was about to go into what is known as a polar vortex. That's fancy for damn cold. So, in order for Smolett to be drawn out of his home in the sub-zero weather at that hour of the morning, it had to be for a pretty darn good reason, and a widely acceptable reason, especially for him going on foot. Whatever he was going out to go and do had to be a basic necessity, essentially. So he said food. He had no food. He needed to get food. Was going out into the freezing cold his only option? Probably not. And he's been called out on that repeatedly. Nobody believed that Smollett's first, best, and only choice was to make a food run on foot in those conditions. So there had to be a more practical way, especially for the average celebrity or public figure. There's the option of perhaps driving himself. I mean, it's highly probable he had his own vehicle. There are food delivery services such as DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates. There's also calling a ride service like Uber or Lyft. So many easier ways of getting food that didn't involve Smolett having to walk around and freeze his ass off. So Smolett is walking around, freezing his ass off. He said his first destination was Walgreens, but it was closed. He was under the impression that it was open 24 hours. For those of you outside of the United States, Walgreens is an American pharmacy retail store. It was actually founded in Chicago, where this story is taking place, in 1901, and there are more than 9,200 locations across 50 states and I believe in Puerto Rico as well. Now, whether or not Walgreens is open 24 hours varies from location to location and from city to city. Some cities may have ordinances that prohibit 24-hour businesses, so they just aren't open those hours. Some cities, like where I live now in Southern Nevada, everything's open 24/7, 365. Granted, it hasn't been that way during the pandemic, but under normal, non-viral disease outbreaks, almost everything is 24 hours. I don't know exactly what it's like in Chicago. Some large cities do have 24-hour businesses. Some areas with high rates of violent crime may not have 24-hour businesses for safety reasons. It depends on the business. In California, there are some cities where there might be 24-hour drive-through fast food places in cities that might have a higher crime rate, cities that are a little bit more shady at night. But what they end up doing is the window where you pay and get your food is designed with 1-inch thick bulletproof glass, and you get your food slid to you the kind of the way that they do in jail, so there's no chance of contact or attacking anybody. So there's ways around it for safety and having 24-hour businesses. But anyway, Walgreens may have been open 24 hours previously. Maybe it was closed because of the extreme weather and the incoming polar vortex. I've never lived anywhere where the temperature goes below freezing, so I'd be guessing as to whether or not businesses close because of below freezing temperatures. Whatever the case, Walgreens was not open that night. Smolett also did say that he left his apartment on foot in the freezing cold, freezing his ass off, not just to look for food, but to also smoke. So for many, many smokers and former smokers and those of us who know smokers, when they need it, they need it. Freezing weather be damned. So it further makes this outing a little bit more believable and plausible because it is a fact that most people go outside to smoke, and smokers are usually not deterred by any kind of weather. And to be honest, maybe it was an afterthought for Smolett, but it actually sounds more legit than going out in those conditions for just food. So, we can question going to Subway, and many of us do, but to go outside for a smoke, okay, yeah, we'll buy that. I don't smoke, but I've known smokers, and when they need a cigarette, they need a cigarette. I've seen them shivering outside. I've seen them dying in the heat. They just don't care. They just finish up their cigarette and come back inside. Smolett did give off a sort of weird, nervous laugh when he did say that he went to have a smoke, which kind of made the story seem a little bit shaky. But anyway, when he found the Walgreens to be closed, Smolett decided to go to Subway instead, which was across the street from his apartment. Again, Subway being open 24 hours got thrown into question all over the place, but I'm not too bothered by it. I live near a 24-hour Subway here in Henderson, Nevada, and I lived a few miles away from a 24-hour Subway in California. Is Subway normally open 24 hours? To me, they seem few and far between if they are. It's pretty rare, but not totally unheard of. So it's one of those things in this case that I don't really question all that much. It's possible that Subway's open 24 hours. Next, Smolett said that he called his creative director, Frank, the one who picked him up from the airport. He told Frank that he was going to Subway to get a salad. Do you want anything? Now, dreamers, I found this exchange, this conversation between him and Frank to be particularly strange for a couple of reasons. And this is only my opinion, but first of all, Smolett telling Frank that he was going to get a salad struck me as oddly specific. Yes, you can get any sandwich on the Subway restaurant menu made into a salad for a low-carb option. But when someone says to you, I'm going to Subway, I can almost guarantee that 99.9% of the people that you tell that to are going to assume that you're going to get a sandwich, because that's what they sell. That's basically all they sell. I'm going to Subway. You might ask me what I was going to get, and I might say, oh, probably the veggie delight or the turkey breast. But you're going to know it's a sandwich restaurant. I don't have to tell you, I'm going to Subway to get a sandwich. Duh, you're going to know that. So I'm bringing this up because I feel as if Smolett threw in that detail about a salad in order to add a layer of legitimacy to what he was saying. The truth has undeniable specifics. Lies are best dealt with using a measure of vagueness and non-specificity. The less details given, the less lies need to be told, and thus the less untruths will be caught being told. But as you tell a story full of lies and ambiguity, throwing in super specific details that are essentially irrelevant to the story gives it a few extra layers of feeling truthful in order to bolster the believability, if that makes sense. It's like you can skimp on some details that might be too easily disproven while giving more specific details in other aspects of the story that are superfluous when it comes to the facts of a case to try and compensate for the vagueness everywhere else in the story. That's why I zeroed in on this salad detail. So next, Smolett told Robin in the interview that while he was getting his food, he texted his manager saying, quote, "Call me when you can." He called me immediately. And while he was on the phone, I heard, as I was crossing the intersection, I heard Empire. Dreamers, now in this moment of the interview, the camera cuts away from Smolett and shows Robin Roberts' expression on her face. And I'm not a body language expert, but she looks totally confused. And honestly, I don't think she's believing what he's saying. Granted, she may be trying to read between the lines because she already knows that his story is being met with a great deal of skepticism. And she could be trying to assess what he is saying for herself. She's interviewed a lot of people. I'm sure she's seen it all. So when he said that he heard Empire, in his interview, he started laughing at the absurdity of it, supposedly of him walking up the street and somebody calling out Empire in order to get his attention. Smolett said, quote, "I don't answer to Empire. I ain't Empire." And I didn't answer. I kept walking. And then I heard effing Empire N-word. So I turned around and said, "What the F did you just say to me?" Some people thought this entire exchange between Smolett and his alleged attackers was a joke, pointing out that Smolett refused to respond to someone yelling Empire at 2 a.m. in sub-freezing temperatures, but he's going to go ahead and respond to the profanity and being called the N-word? Okay, if he says so. So, Smolett continued, quote, "The attacker, masked, said, 'This is MAGA country, N-word,' and then he punched me in the face. So, I punched his ass right back." People have criticized this exchange as well, pointing out that the fact that they are proclaiming that this is MAGA country, that they are using racial slurs, that these are supposedly white men, later on Smolett will describe them as white, and that the likelihood of these white men being fans of Empire and watching the show was pretty much slim to none, as was the likelihood that they would have even known and recognized who Jussie Smollett was. That's another thing that started having people question the validity of all this. Like, two white guys yelling MAGA country or this is MAGA country are not going home to watch Empire. So anyway, Smolett continued, quote, "And then we started tussling. You know, it was very icy and we ended up tussling by the stairs, fighting. That's exactly how Smolett worded it, you guys. This altercation between himself and this one attacker. Fighting. I'm bothered by this because it is very vague, but I feel like he's attempting to make it sound more authentic by using repetition. He does it several times in this conversation. And aside from that, I really want you to think about this. We've heard somebody describing a fight before, whether it be getting into a fight or maybe watching a fight on TV. And generally we get a pretty descriptive blow by blow. Maybe not about the entire fight, but perhaps some of the more exciting or dramatic or impressive moments. If I told you I went to some really big boxing match or I watched a big boxing match on TV between two well-known fighters and you asked me how was the fight and all I said was, yeah, it was fighting. You might accuse me of not paying attention, not watching, or possibly not having seen the fight at all. I feel like it was a statement that Smolett made in order to fill in a very important part of the attack that he said that he had endured. And perhaps he really didn't have a whole lot of details because the fight never actually happened. Smolett had no specifics to offer beyond fighting. And honestly, a lot of the interview, when it comes to the attack, most of it is vague, or he diverts or he pivots in other directions and takes the conversation elsewhere. And remember, he's an actor, so he can be convincing if you're not looking for signs of bullshit. Smolett continued with his story, quote, "There was a second person involved who was kicking me in my back. And then it just stopped. And they ran off. And I saw where they ran." People found this to be difficult to believe as well. That these three men got into a quote-unquote tussle, and then it suddenly, randomly ended. That these two guys planned out this hate crime, and then suddenly ran off in less than 45 seconds, just like that. Also, later on down the line, when pictures of Smollett's injuries were reported on the media, they were so minimal and so superficial and barely visible to the naked eye that more and more people began to think that a fight never really took place. And people even thought perhaps that the itty-bitty little marks that you saw on Smollett's face, their tiny little boo-boos, that those could have been self-inflicted because they weren't that serious. It did not look like this guy got punched in the face. So Smolett continued, quote, "The phone was in my pocket, but it had fallen out and it was sitting there and my manager was still on the phone. So I picked up the phone and said, 'Brandon,' and he was like, 'What's going on?' I said, 'I was just jumped.' And then I looked down and saw there's a rope around my neck." Robin stopped him here and said, "You hadn't noticed it before?" And he answered, "No, because it happened so fast. It felt like minutes, but it was probably 30 seconds. Honestly, I can't tell you honestly." Dreamers, I probably don't need to tell you that nobody believes that these attackers were able to get a rope around Smollett's neck without him noticing. No matter what is going on in the moment, which is really nothing, let's just be real about that, but I try to imagine myself in this situation. If I found myself in a tussle, would I notice some object going around my neck? Hell yeah, I would. The neck is probably the most sensitive part of our body. It is almost an automatic reaction, one that is instinctual to protect our necks. Any sort of sensation on or around our necks is going to have us grabbing at whatever it is we're feeling, right? Think about it. You're in a tussle. It is clearly not an all-out, knockdown, drag-out fight. At no time did Smolett say that he was being overtaken by his attackers. He never said that he was knocked out or temporarily stunned or dazed. In fact, as he began to speak openly and publicly about the attack, he indicated quite the opposite. He said that he was strong, that he did not allow himself to be weak in the face of this attack, that he successfully defended himself. He even said at a concert that he performed at shortly after the attack that he was the gay Tupac. Yeah, he said that. He compared this attack to Tupac. A man who had been shot once in 1994 5 times, including twice in the head during a robbery attempt. A shooting which Tupac survived. And then he was shot a second time in 1997, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and a bullet fragment landing in his lung. He survived for 6 days before he went into respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. Doctors continued to try to keep him alive until his mother finally made the decision to cease medical intervention, and he died shortly later. Jussie Smollett called himself the gay Tupac. Undoubtedly, Tupac was a hardened young man. But Jussie Smollett? Born and raised on the zesty, full-bodied, fruit-filled, aromatic streets of wine country? Come on, give me a break. And I have to ask, was Jussie Smollett being hard when he got pulled over for that DUI in 2007? Did he stand up and take responsibility for the trouble that he was about to get into, or did he react like a little punk by identifying himself by his brother's name instead of his own? That's tough. Did he ask himself, what would Tupac do? Anyway, Smolett said he never noticed the rope until his attackers fled, and he had a moment to get his wits about him. He continued with the story, quote, "I noticed the rope around my neck, and I started screaming, and I said, 'There's an effing rope around my neck.'" Robin Roberts next asked Smolett if he was able to provide a description of his attackers. He was vague, but this is not unusual in general. Many victims of crimes struggle to provide a useful description of assailants, so I won't ding Smolett for that. He said that he provided a physical description of their build. He called it a body description. And then he said, quote, "Because I saw this," and then he motioned with his hands that he saw the eye area of the faces through the eye holes of the ski masks that these men had on. But I couldn't tell what color their eyes were. I did not see anything except the second person I saw running away. And the first person, yeah, I saw his stature. I gave the description as best I could. You have to understand that this is Chicago in winter. People can wear ski masks and nobody's going to question that. I watched this reaction video on YouTube by this guy named Linnell Harris, and he said, "Yeah, but somebody's going to question somebody going outside in negative 20-degree weather for a damn Subway sandwich." I know, right? So anyway, next, Robin asked Smolett about the video surveillance that police had combed through and how they were able to pull a still image of two people of interest, or two persons of interest, however that's supposed to be said. I want to quickly note right now that if you've seen the actual video of the men, it's very dark and icy. There are some street lights, and as the men are walking and they get closer to one of the lights, it hits at least one of them just right, so you can see that he is actually wearing a red baseball cap. The still image that circulated in the media, this hat was not visible. I'll talk more about this later, but just remember that this guy had a red hat on. Robin asked Smolett if he had seen the image and did he believe that they could be the attackers, and he said that he did. She asked, "What is it about their size, or what did you feel it could possibly be them?" And Smolett answered, "'Cause I was there." For me, when that was released, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. I don't have any doubt in my mind that that's them. I never did. So, with the positive identification coming from Smolett himself, when the police did positively identify those individuals in their investigation, Smollett's confirmation that those were indeed the men who attacked him pretty much solidified the case that the police were building against Smolett, not the attackers. It's strongly believed by investigators that Smolett did indeed want this attack captured on surveillance cameras that lined the streets and intersections near his apartment. But it ended up not happening because the camera that was near where the attack actually took place was pointed away from where the men tussled. Not a single moment of it was captured. When Smolett confirmed the two men seen on the video were his attackers, I do believe that he did not think that those two men would ever be found or identified. And I do know that when police showed Smolett those images, they already decided that the attack was fake. And what this meant was Smolett was helping them to confirm it. They even said if Smolett had not said that those were the men, they would have had no case. But using that video, they were going to be able to track those men. And I will go through that specific part of the investigation later on, likely in part 2. Robin next asked Smolett why he hesitated to call the police. If you recall in the 911 call, his creative director, Frank, told the operator that Smolett did not want to report the attack, but Frank was making him do it. He was the older, wiser, sensible person. He was not going to allow Smolett to let this go without reporting it. He made that clear in follow-up interviews. So to Robin's question, Smolett said as he smiled, quote, there's a level of pride there. We live in a society where, and here for the first time, Smolett begins to show some emotion. You can see that tears are welling up in his eyes, and he says, quote, "As a gay man, you are considered somehow to be weak. And I am not weak. I am not weak. And we are, as a people, not weak. So I can accept that there was pride there. Also privacy. At the end of the day, look what has happened, Look what has happened. So I'm glad that Frank called the police. I'm glad that we reported it." Of course, it's generally believed that Jussie Smollett never intended for the police to get involved in this. That he did want the publicity about the attack to make the rounds in the news and on social media, but the plan did not include reporting the incident to the police. The way that everything appeared to be planned out and carried out, it all happened with little to no attempt at covering anyone's tracks. And that will become quite obvious when we get into the investigation. This lack of covering one's tracks included the attackers being captured on store surveillance, purchasing ski masks and rope. They also apparently asked the store clerk for MAGA hats, but the clerk was like, nobody sells those. So instead, the two men purchased plain red baseball caps. Their surveillance in the store revealed something that the surveillance on the street did not reveal: that these two men were black, not white, and they paid for these items with a $100 bill. So, because of all of these things, this clerk remembered these two men very well. There were also phone calls and text messages between Smolett and the men who would later be identified as the attackers. There was a history of communication. The communication continued up until the point of the attack and picked back up afterwards. To me, and to many people, this is an indication that Smolett never thought the attackers would be identified. Little did he know that he would actually be the one to positively identify them for police when he said that he was certain that that was them in those images pulled from the intersection surveillance. Imagine if Smolett had said, "No, that doesn't look like the men." The investigation would have stalled out. Smolett was the only person that could have said, "Yes, that's them," or "No, that's not them," and the case would have lived or died on his answer. But he said, "Yes, that's them." But why? Why did Smolett say that that's the men that attacked him? Why did he give the positive ID? Why didn't he just keep it ambiguous and say, "I don't know"? The police may have dropped the entire investigation and never looked into it any deeper than that. But Smolett said, "Yes, that's them." And I believe that the reason he did that is because he needed his story to be believed. Those images made his phantom attackers real. He never thought that those two men would be tracked through a series of surveillance videos throughout Chicago that would ultimately lead police right to their front door. In that moment, Jussie Smollett said that those were his attackers. He really thought that he was the smartest guy in the room, that he was actually going to sit there and outsmart the Chicago Police Department, and that they'd never be able to figure out who those two dark, shadowy figures were. Even a friend of Smollett's who looked at that image with him when he was first shown it, she said to him, "They're never going to find them. They're never going to find them." I think Smolett truly believed that. And finally, one of the best parts of this entire story: the $3,500 check that Smolett wrote, paid to the order of my attackers. I'm just kidding, it didn't say that. Here's the thing: the attackers and their Nigerian American brothers, Abel and Ola Osundario, they are personal trainers, and they are massively huge and muscular individuals. If you follow this case at all, you've likely seen pictures of them online with their shirts open, and these men are just so huge. And at least one of them had dabbled in acting, having landed a role as an extra on none other than Empire. Yep, Empire. And they had been Jussie Smollett's personal trainers for quite some time. We can only assume that the check Smolett gave to them for $3,500 was noticeably more than what he had usually been paying them for their training services. As the Osundario brothers said, this was payment for the attack. The memo line didn't have written in it payment for phony attack, rope, bleach, and MAGA hats. It said that it was for personal training. But if that check was an amount much more than past checks, or the pattern of payments that Smolett had been making to these men for their physical training, then yeah, it would have raised some red flags once the police were getting deeper into the investigation and uncovering the relationship between the Osundario brothers and Smolett. But, as I've said, it's believed that Smolett never intended for there to be a police investigation into this. He never thought he'd be connected with the attackers, and that the attackers would never be identified as associates of his. I have a little bit of commentary about Smollett's statement about being glad that Frank called the police, that he's glad that they reported the attack. I know that this doesn't surprise you, but I don't think that Smolett genuinely meant that when he said that he was glad. I think it's the proper thing to say and think and feel. I think that Smolett believes it was the right thing to do, but I don't think he wanted police called, and I certainly don't think that he's glad about it. Knowing what we know as to how this story would ultimately end up unfolding, I know that he wasn't happy about it. He didn't want Frank to call police. He told Frank to not call. Frank told 911 that he was told to not call. I just don't think Smolett anticipated Frank being so damn insistent upon it. I mean, how was Smolett supposed to argue with that? The right thing to do was to make the report. That is, if it were actually a real thing that occurred to be reported. There's one last thing I want to commentate on before I wrap up this first part, and it has to do with another couple of mistakes or missteps that Smolett made. Something he did that I think brought about more suspicion rather than validating his claims. So let me see if I can explain this. I mentioned the noose being a component of the attack on Smolett. That the attackers at some point during the tussling managed to slip this noose around his neck unbeknownst to him until they ran off and he had a chance to notice. He looked down and saw it. The other thing that he would later report noticing in the aftermath of the attack was the fact that he had bleach poured on him. This was apparently something he wasn't aware of when it happened either. He said that it caused some blotchy stains to appear on his sweater. Now, I saw the sweater that he was wearing on some police body cam footage. And to me, the sweater he had on was patterned, but it was predominantly white or ivory in color. It had a pretty busy kind of Aztec sort of a pattern, but still, the main color, the majority of the sweater, was some shade of white. I do not believe that bleach stains would have been that easily visible based on the patterns and color that the sweater was. When I first heard the interview and he brought up seeing bleached out spots on his sweater or jacket, I thought that he was wearing something that was dark in color, and that when it got bleach on him, those stains would immediately appear. This sweater, I think he'd be hard-pressed to search for bleached out spots on what appeared to be a knitted white winter sweater. Another detail about his story that bugs me is the time that passed between the attack coming to an end and Smolett making his way up to his apartment. It was during this time that Smolett is purportedly doused in bleach and he has a makeshift noose hanging from his neck. He said a couple of times in his interview, his privacy was of utmost importance to him, as well as his pride. Both of those things were going to be taking some serious hits if this racist and homophobic attack were to become public information. So with that in mind, his initial reaction was to not want to report this hate crime to the Chicago police. His pride was holding him back. This was an embarrassing and humiliating thing to have occurred. This is a completely understandable way to feel about this attack. It is not uncommon for victims of violent crimes to experience these feelings. Absolutely, it's valid. And again, I tried to put myself in his place, faced with what he's faced with. I don't want anyone to know or find out about this attack. It's one of the most humiliating things that's ever happened in my life. I want to deal with it privately and move on without having to deal with anybody else. So what do? You go dark. You maintain your silence. You attempt to heal alone and in private. You try and fix it on your own. You try and pull yourself together. You dust yourself off. You put on your face of normalcy. And you try to seamlessly slide right back into life as you knew it before, like nothing happened. Nobody ever has to know how you were attacked or how you were humiliated. But Jussie Smollett did not do that. He did not do any of this. Considering he repeatedly insisted that he wanted to maintain his pride and his privacy, he did not do anything to try and hide the fact that this happened to him. After the attack, he said he screamed into the phone that there was a rope around his neck. Screaming this on the street in front of his apartment into his phone that there's a rope around his neck. Then Smolett goes into his apartment building. He goes all the way up to his unit. And remember, at this point, he is thinking he has it in his mind that the police are not going to have any involvement here. No cops, right? But dreamers, tell me this. What do you think Jussie Smollett did with the bleached out clothes and the noose around his neck as he made his way back upstairs? What would you do? I don't know about any of you, but I hate the smell of bleach. Even if I have just a tiny amount of it on my hand for some reason, if I was careless about it or got some onto my skin, no amount of scrubbing gets rid of that strong odor that bleach gives off. It is just awful. So imagine wearing clothing that is doused in bleach. I don't think many of us could stand the smell for very long, and most of us would probably start getting sick. And we'd have to take those clothes off and try to scrub our bodies off as quickly as possible. That's what I would do, absolutely. But not Jussie Smollett. He kept the bleached clothing on. And he also kept the noose on around his neck. This long-standing symbol of racism, hatred, terrorism, something that is so shocking and terrifying and offensive. They left it around his neck. If Smolett wanted to maintain his pride and his privacy, what in the world would motivate him to not get rid of everything that was used in this attack against him? He at first said he did not and would not be calling the police. So that seems to be an indicator to me that he is ready to quickly put this behind him. He doesn't want to make a big fuss, that he has it in his mind that this attack isn't serious enough to warrant police involvement. So the next course of action is to get on with his night. Take off the noose, throw it away, take off the bleached clothing, throw all that away too, jump in the shower, clean up, and try to get some rest. Quickly and quietly move on. Pride and privacy intact. Smolett said in his interview with Robin when she asked about keeping the noose on, he said that he wanted the police to see what had been done to him. No, he didn't. Quite the opposite, actually. So what changed? Well, the cops got called. That's what changed. It took them about 30 minutes to get to his apartment and to make their way upstairs to his place. And they found him still with the bleached clothes and noose around his neck. Why, Jussie? What about your pride? What about your privacy? Well, now Frank went and called the police, and now he needs these things to be witnessed in order for them to be perceived as real. I don't know of any other reason to keep that rope around his neck and the bleached clothing on other than to give his narrative a visual shock value. Going back to the interview for a moment before I wrap up part 1 here, Smolett had told Robin Roberts after he talked about being perceived as gay and that he was glad everything was reported to police. He said, quote, "During the time before they came, it took them about a half hour to come. And during that time, I was looking at myself, just like checking myself out. I saw the bruise on my neck, the little rope burn around my neck. And I smelled the bleach. And I know the smell of bleach. And I saw my sweatshirt. It had marks on it, like spots on it, like when you had a really bad bleach job. So then I was like, there's bleach on me too. So when the police came, I kept the clothes on. I kept the rope on." And I just explained why I think he did what he did and why it didn't make any sense to me. But Robin Roberts asked, "You kept the rope on the entire time?" She seemed to have found it hard to believe and understand why he would do something like that. And he answered, "It wasn't like it was wrapped around, but yeah, it was around because I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see what this was. I told them what happened, everything." Okay, so again, there's some contradictions here. First, when he said, I wanted them to see what this was. No, he didn't. He did not want the police to see this at all. He wanted the attack to go viral on the internet and social media, and we'll get into the reasons for that later. But Smolett made it clear to Frank, the man who called 911, that he did not want him to call 911. He knew a police investigation would quickly uncover massive inconsistencies in this hate crime narrative. In addition to that, Smolett contradicted himself again when talking about the rope when he said, quote, "It wasn't like wrapped around, but yeah, it was around." And I'm sitting here listening like, well, which is it? Is it or isn't it? Wrapped around or not? Okay, so dreamers, I have a lot more to pick apart when it comes to the tall tales of Jussie Smollett. But I do want to get this recorded and set to go live before I leave for California Saturday morning. And it is Friday night tonight. It's 8:53 p.m. as I'm wrapping this up. I spent all day babysitting. I was able to finish writing this out while I was babysitting. But I'm going to stop this here. And in part 2, I'm going to pick up from where we're leaving off in the interview with Robert Roberts, which I find completely and totally fascinating and cringy. We are also going to go through the timeline of how police found their way to the Ascendario brothers and how their investigation had Smollett's story falling apart within 2 weeks of the official investigation commencing. We will talk about the Chicago's chief of police and his scathing press conference, where he basically shredded Smolett and his character into bits and pieces publicly. And I want to say that the district attorney and the prosecutors, for the manner in which they handled the Smolett case with kid gloves, the chief also expressed his disdain for that. We will finish with where the case stands today. Probably still like everything else going on as a result of COVID-19. Things might be moving slowly right now, but Smollett's troubles are far from over. So stay tuned for part 2. I am looking to have it written over the next couple of days and recorded by Monday or Tuesday of next week. I want to again thank you all for your love and support. I am so grateful for the show bringing us together. I'm so excited to be going to California tomorrow to visit my daughter. Until next time, dreamers, as always, sweet dreams. Except for you, Jussie Smollett. I think you deserve 1 or 2 toss and turn nights. Everybody else, rest well, my friends. I will talk to you soon.
Hey California Dreaming listeners, if you're a fan of this show, then I know you will love the brand new podcast, Riddle Me That, True Crime. It covers mainly unsolved international cases. The host, myself, comes from an academic background and loves to dive deep into cases. Those cases that don't seem to have a clear resolution, such as the disappearance of Upali Wijewardene, formerly Sri Lanka's richest man. He disappeared in his private plane over the Straits of Malacca. No trace of the passengers or aircraft was ever found. Was it an accident or an assassination? Listen and weigh in for yourselves. During these strange times, it's comforting to have something entertaining to listen to. Who knows, perhaps you can help solve a mystery. Riddle Me That True Crime is on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.